Solodeconstruction.
What's up, everybody? It's the Hard Deconstruction. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, mostly on YouTube. Give us a like, share, and subscribe. Hit that thumbs up. Hit that bell icon. Let people know about your favorite show, The Hard Deconstruction, with your host, Komp. And today, this is a solo deconstruction based on the film Uncle Sam from 1996. Desert Storm vet who was killed in combat rises from the grave on July 4th to kill the unpatriotic citizens of his hometown after some teens burn an American flag over his burial site. Directed by William Lustig, written by Larry Cohen, starring William Smith, David Shark Fralick, Christopher Ogden, Leslie Neal, and a whole bunch of other people. So, happy 4th to the Americans. I guess it's just a normal day for everybody else. This is a time for celebration of all the terrors that we've gone through, I guess. So we forget everything that we're dealing with in America, and we just look at fireworks in the sky. That's fantastic. And everything goes back to normal tomorrow. Anyway, so Uncle Sam is this film that I was aware of a long time ago. It seemed like one of those bargain basement sort of straight-to-DVD films, straight-to-VHS films, like anything that you'd see out of William Castle movies, or not William Castle, but like Dark Castles. Not even Dark Castle. Dark Castle actually went to theaters. Stuff like Puppet Master movies or Brian Usna movies just had that air to it, and I don't think I was wrong about it. I will say this as one of the greatest taglines ever. It's on the poster, one of the better posters, because there's a really shitty poster of one of the worst Photoshop covers of Uncle Sam ever. This one is alright because it's like a demonic. He looks like fucking Wishmaster, and he has his finger pointed out in the typical Uncle Sam look, and it says, "Uncle Sam, I want you dead," which obviously they turn on the original phrasing for the Uncle Sam poster, who was used as propaganda to get people to serve in the military. Shout out to our military people. You know, you got to do what you got to do. Anyway, so this film starts out with this movie starts out in Kuwait, and Kuwait looks like suspiciously looks like some beach somewhere that could be in any place, and apparently we see a downed fighter jet that was shot down by friendly fire, and a couple of corporals or a sergeant comes in, and they go to inspect these bodies that are burnt out in this burnt out military plane. And, they're like, oh, friendly fire. And this guy has a dope voice. I don't know who this sergeant is or this colonel or whatever. And he's like, yeah, well, it's friendly fire. Don't say that phrase. Stuff like that. So they go check out the body. And we see that one of the guys who's burnt out to a crisp is not actually dead. The major, played by William Smith. Great voice on that guy. They find the body of Sam Harper. Sam Harper awakens from his deathly slumber. He's all charred up. And he kills everybody. Kills the two. He kills the army guy checking on him, and he also kills the major. And I guess that's that. So, whatever. We cut to, I guess, a couple of weeks later, or whatever, where we see a young boy named Jody, played by Christopher Ogden. Pretty good actor. He's all right for this type of movie. He's not super annoying. He could be. He's this kid who's always idolized his uncle, who he's never really had a relationship with. I did like that they give a backstory to Sam Harper, that we find out later that Sam Harper, this guy that Jody idolized as his uncle, because he never really had a relationship with him, but he just knew that he went to the war, and whatever Sam said was just brainwashing this kid, saying, you got to fight for the country. If anybody doesn't fight for the country in unjust wars, that's bullshit. You got to. Surprisingly, the film is very nuanced in its portrayal of. Although it is one-sided about thoughts about joining the military and fighting unjust wars, because there's also obviously Isaac Hayes, who's awesome, who was a chef in South Park, and I was waiting for him to break out into music, but he doesn't. And he's this one-legged army dude. It doesn't specify which army he was. I don't know if it was a Korean War or if it was in Vietnam. I would assume it's Vietnam. But he lost his leg, and he was a super patriotic guy, and I guess what happened is that he inspired Sam to go to the war, and he's been regretful about it ever since. And it's nuanced in the film that we're taught, because a lot of people by this time were seeing that there was some shit going on with Kuwait and other wars. I think that it's an interesting take on the material. You couldn't make this movie now because the fucking, oh my god, there would be people flying off about how unpatriotic and it's like the pussification of America and shit like that, as opposed to, I mean, you can look at this as just Hollywood people saying, oh, what do we got to go to war? Let's go make another movie. Let's make The Matrix 12 or something. But, you know, it's an interesting point that I wouldn't think this movie would be dealing with, but it makes sense for the Sam Harper, Uncle Sam character to be pissed off at quote-unquote unpatriotic Americans. And for the first half an hour of the film, which I think is actually really interesting, is this kid's sort of learning about his uncle, who actually was a big piece of shit. And I was surprised that they went in that route, because a lot of movies are sort of scared to go through routes because they don't want to quote-unquote trigger people, because people are fucking, obviously, they can't take anything anymore. You have to tell them before they freak out and go to the therapist or other horse shit. Let's just say we're in the middle here where there's a lot of people that are fucking annoying on both sides. Either you say some shit about the war, then it's like, oh, you're un-American. And then if you bring up some trauma that another character has, they go, oh, it's just like, what can you do nowadays? So nowadays you can't really make this movie without offending somebody, which is surprising because they're making Don't Breathe Part 2, and the main hero, they're making the bad guy from Don't Breathe the hero in the sequel, and he had spoilers. He did something like sexually bad to people in the first one, and I'm like, how the fuck are you gonna walk that back? You can't walk that back. Anyway, so this is not as bad as that. You know, that I could understand that being traumatizing to people, but whatever. So this one is like if you're making a hero out of essentially a rapist guy from like Don't Breathe 2, like this is not that bad, but I can understand people getting offended by that. But this one, there is mention of Sam Harper. He was molesting his sister when she was younger, and it was that's not good. That's a bad guy. And he was also abusive to his wife. So, when you cut back to, I guess, normal life in this town where Sam Harper lived, his wife is now getting on with a new cop, but she's, still nervous because they never found out what happened to Sam, honestly, until recently into this film. They just know that he disappeared 2 years. I guess this is maybe 2 years later, I'm not sure. And she's sort of trying to move on, and his sister, her son is Jody, who's the main kid, and you just see their kind of dynamic getting together. And I thought, for what it didn't suck. And it's interesting because this director, William Lustig, I was like, how do I know his name? Because I kept mistaking him for the guy who somebody involved with Exorcist or something like that. I was like, William Lustig, how do I know this name? But obviously he directed a lot of the Maniac Cop films. The Maniac Cop one was okay. It's an interesting sort of character study for the first half an hour of this kid Jody, who has blind sort of trust in his uncle, who is the super patriotic guy and almost jingoistic to a fault. And that's the thing in America. America, we have that sort of freedom to be aware of things and to voice our opinions on it. And if you try to stop talking about things, then that's pretty, you're like, uh-oh, now we're going to territories from other countries, we got to be worried about that. But that was interesting with Jody's character. I liked the whole first dynamic. I almost think that the movie got worse when the action started, because there's no real action going on until like 40 minutes into the film. But this is a horror film. This is what we're here for. We're here to see Uncle Sam slash people, and we want to figure out why that is. So they ship Jody's body. I'm not Jody. They ship Sergeant Sam Harper's body. I don't know what the fuck, how he's possessed by the ghost of George Washington or Uncle Sam himself or something like that. I don't know what the fuck happened. But they put him in this closed coffin that's sealed. They bring it into the house. I wouldn't want a fucking coffin like that in my house, honestly. Especially if this guy who molested you when you were young and then would abuse his wife, like, I'd be like, no, throw that motherfucker in a ditch. Who cares? But I guess because they wanted to put military honors and it's so close to a patriotic time that they wanted to, bury their hero. I don't even know how the fuck what did the army do? Like when they found Sam's body with a major and another army guy shot to death, clearly by a gun that's next to Sam Harper, but they decide to give him full military burial. Okay, whatever. Anyway, that's just something I guess they didn't really think about it. Although the writing is not really bad in this movie. Towards the end is when it gets a little goofy, but it's so strange that fucking like Sam Harper, Uncle Sam, wakes up because somebody's burning an American flag. Like these couple of dorks that are like these nerdy teenage kids who are like, I guess, just burning an American flag next to the 4th of July. I guess they're trying to be badasses or something, and that wakes up Uncle Sam. Like, that's how patriotic. Like, America was so pissed off that it rejiggered this guy, this dead guy. I don't understand also is that Uncle Sam was like, Sam Harper was like clearly burnt to a crisp, but it just turned them into the creeper from that pedophile movie, Jeepers Creepers. Like, he just looks like that. Like, because if you get burnt, your face kind of like, the whole point of being burnt alive is that your face disintegrates. Like, you lose fat and, muscle and cartilage from your face. This looks like it made him into a mutant from a Power Rangers show or something like that. So it looks like he's gotten a face on top of his face, which makes no fucking sense. He would look like a skeleton, but whatever. It's whatever. And so he comes back, and in the most humorous way, like, because Danny had taught me that he just couldn't stop laughing at this movie, that with one of his he saw it with his ex-girlfriend, that they had to watch the scene over and over because they kept laughing about it. And it was a funny scene, but there's a guy who's on stilts in the Uncle Sam suit, and he's looking through this woman's window after she's gotten out of the shower, and it made no fucking sense because the second that woman walked into her room, you could see there's a man who's about 12 feet tall looking into your window, which makes no fucking sense. But it delivered some good nudity, so good for them. So it's this woman with I'm sure they told the director, listen, put somebody nude in there. So, like, of course, you see this woman's buttocks, and she's nude, which turns on whoever that guy is on the stilts. He's so shocked that she catches him because she hears his disgusting labored shock at her rear buttocks, and he starts trying to run away real fast. And she just sort of says, in one of the, I don't know why they obviously must have not recorded audio in this scene because it's all dubbed, and it's like you just saw 3 minutes of a European movie that they dubbed in English because the voice acting is awful. It doesn't even fit whatever it just sounds like nothing. It doesn't even look like the people that said this. And he walks and he's running into the forest while I guess he's on stilts because he wanted to look into a window to see a naked lady, but he falls on his ass. This is the part that Danny kept laughing about. And Uncle Sam Harper himself, kills him and takes his mask. And they do that bullshit where they cut out the murders on the screen. It's like, just show it. Because there are graphic murders later on. But when they start out the first killings in movies, like, I don't understand why I guess maybe it's a budgetary thing. But they just cut it to black or cut to another scene. It's like, just show the fucking guy get cut in half. I didn't see this because I'm gonna be too shocked by this. It's like, the graphics are not that fucking great. Although they're not bad, actually. And so then this is when Uncle Sam starts his killing spree, and, he first dispatches a couple teens. He buries one guy alive. He just disemboweling people. And this leads on to the main crux, which is a horror film mostly in daytime, which is interesting. Because, they made a big thing about Midsummer about that, but this did it. Like, people getting killed left and right during this bicentennial, not bicentennial, I guess it been before that, this big American patriotic day where they're having celebration about 4th of July. And to go back a little bit about Jody and his confrontation about his uncle, he's still kind of pissed. He's upset about finding about his uncle had passed away because he still has this glorified idea about him. And he goes into class and he opens up this box of medals and he tries to show it to the class. And the teacher, played by Timothy Bottoms, who would end up playing a version of George W. Bush in a series of shows for Comedy Central by the South Park guys. And he plays this teacher who decided to go to Canada while the Vietnam War was happening. And there's an interesting discussion about, what people think are unjust wars and stuff like that, and what we find out later on what happened, what Vietnam was about. There's a lot of weird things about wars that go on with each country, but especially the United States, because the most powerful nation in the world, quote unquote. And it's interesting to hear this dialogue in a film, because it's not just a stupid movie with slasher shit, but there's some interesting ideas, and I can appreciate that. I mean, all in all, it's not a terrible film. I'm not saying this is, it makes you think at least. There's people who obviously served in the military that are going to be offended by this, and and I understand why, because you are volunteering to put your life on the line for an entire nation. So you're gonna be like, wait, you don't get you suddenly just writing this off. So it's very important to look at it in both ways, and it's an interesting idea that's brought up, or it's an interesting conversation to have in this movie. But nowadays, it just seems it will just be a straight fucking confrontation, and people just bitch on both sides about this. Either way, so Tim Bottoms, does a really good line reading. He's good acting in this one scene about this guy who, he believed in what he believed, but he sort of feels shame that he didn't serve his country. So I don't know if the film is on one or the other side about it. Obviously the main heroes of the film are these people who didn't, they were reticent about going to war, and then also making the Uncle Sam character, who's this patriotic stand-in, a molester and a murderer, who beats his wife and shit like that. It's obviously leaning to one way, but it does still keep the dialogue open for people. I think the whole slasher element towards the second half of the film, where he is just offing people left and right during this celebration, is pretty cool. You could tell they're really cheap, because there's a scene where they're starting up this whole parade and it looks nice because it's a nice little white picket fence kind of town, and it's just people it's like imagine that, like, there's probably nothing really to do besides the fucking mall, so they're like, okay, we're gonna have a big patriotic 4th of July thing, so this is most likely probably a red state, and they're so cheap that they couldn't shoot a real procession of a parade, that they put in stock. It has to be stock footage of something from the 80s or the 60s, and you're just like, wait a minute, these people look like people from the 60s or the 80s, and then it just cuts back to regular film. So it's just funny that they just bought this stock footage, and I know it's stock footage because the opening credits are stock footage, but they try to kind of level it in so it looks like it's modern 1990s, which is horse shit. Anyway, the kills are pretty good. There's this asshole kid who does have a funny scene where he's trying to sing the national anthem and he's just mockingly being a dickhead. And the reactions by other characters are pretty realistic with dealing with assholes in this movie, so it's pretty fucking funny. This guy who gets killed in that same kid who was being mocking of the song, and then they just talk about. It's funny because then there's one guy who's like a lawyer of the boyfriend of the mother who Jody doesn't like. I understand. I knew this guy was gonna get killed. I didn't think the fucking cop was gonna get killed, but this guy is like, he's talking about the Star Spangled Banner, and he goes, "Oh, why is that guy? What's that? What name another song that guy wrote?" I couldn't stop laughing because it's too fucking funny. It's just funny. It's funny. It's I understand why people still talk about this movie. They were actually gonna try to make an Uncle Sam 2, but they never did. And oh man, it would have been fucking great. Like nowadays, because then people would be like, like I said before, they would just shit their pants about this movie. And I can imagine if a certain conservative websites by some fast talking guys would make a version of this, it would just be killing of God knows who. You just say who they would think is unpatriotic. It would just be just tons of them getting killed off left and right, and it would be like, oh shit, this. But I think that the kills are great. There's a head inside of a grill gag. There's fucking they kill some girl who was grilling that food. I was super surprised to see Robert Forster here. I was like, Robert Forster really was like, what the hell happened? Like Robert Forster, I guess at that time he was just, I don't know why he was in this movie, because that guy is he became so beloved as an actor, because I guess most likely he probably did Jackie Brown after this maybe, but he was like a famous actor back then, and then he became a little bit more famous. He had a resurgence in his career and did a lot of the really cool movies. He's a really cool actor, and he's playing like this scummy, corrupt politician, and everybody hates him and boos him, and that's pretty funny. So there's also PJ Souls who's in here, who's a horror iconic person. It's so fucking funny. The more I think about this movie, it's pretty funny. It's actually funny, and Larry Cohen did a good job with putting this together. It's not a perfect horror film, but the first half is an intriguing sort of weird docudrama. and then the latter half is just like the slasher, like the sloppiest sort of slasher film that you can make. But it's not like bad. Like there was effort put into it, but there's a cheapness element that was sort of lazy to the lensing of the film. But the movie doesn't feel like the cheapness of one of those. And I know people get pissed when I talk about full moon pictures, but just look at a fucking full moon picture compared to, just watch this movie compared to that. But I'm sure, they intertwine, and this is probably some arm of that company. There's this bizarre kid who's been burnt, he's in a wheelchair, he wears glass shades, I guess he's blind. I don't understand what he's about. He almost seems like he has psychic powers, like a fucking X-Men, like he's a Professor X in this movie. I don't know what the hell. He like helps them at the end of the movie. It's very strange. I don't understand where this character come from. They don't explain what the hell happened to him. Whatever, but he's there in the movie. But this is, it looks competently made. It doesn't look like it's greatly made, but it's competently made. And I was surprised by some of the kills, The last confrontation with Uncle Sam, like Uncle Sam comes out and he looks strange because he's just like completely shadowed out, and he's like whispering all his lines. So I guess they didn't really go for looking for an iconic villain. Like his mask isn't really that good. Like they could have gotten a better Uncle Sam mask that looked like the demonic face from the poster. We don't know why the fuck he came back from life. Like I guess his hatred and his molesting powers gave him, evil powers to come back from the dead. Like, it doesn't make any fucking sense. He's sort of kind of blasé as a personality. When he's just killing people, it's fine, but there's no Jason element, there's no Michael Myers. I have clearly no Freddy element to him that makes him entertaining. Like if he was sort of like a huckster, kind of, if he came back like Looney Tunes because of the war, and he was sort of, had that grand old American style of bullshittery that we love here in America, then they could have made him fun. Like he could have been like Leprechaun, But they didn't. He's just sort of this menacing, silent character. But under the face of the Uncle Sam, like there's a part where Isaac Hayes' character sees him, and he's shocked because he can see the eyes. The Uncle Sam under, like you can see this through the eye holes of the mask. He's fucking got black skin and green eyes like a demon from hell, or yellow eyes. And I'd be like, what the fuck is going on with you? Like I'd be like that. Like he's. When they ask Isaac Hayes' character, but he goes, I don't know, there was something about him. And I was like, something about him? His fucking face is burnt underneath the mask. He had yellow eyes. Yeah, you got a fucking... I'd be like, hey, I'd call the cops. Like, there's a psycho out here. But whatever, I guess they just... Who the hell knows? So, as a horror character himself, he's not necessarily anything interesting. The kills are okay. Robert Forster gets a pretty good send-off, which is pretty funny. But... And then the final confrontation is sort of lazy, with this cannon that they show. So it's sort of a Chekhov's weapon sort of thing, where they show this weapon earlier in the film and then they put it back at the end to destroy Uncle Sam. And I don't really understand the ending of the film. I think they were trying to do some Friday the 13th Part 4 shit, when Jason gets killed and his psychosis goes into Tommy Jarvis, but then they retcon it because at the end, Jody is burning all the military shit that I guess his uncle must have sent him, or all the stuff that he loved because of the war, and his mom is really happy about it because his mom became a hippie or something. She really hates the U.S. Army infrastructure or something. Although I think it's more of Sam that was the asshole, not the... Well, I guess people can make an argument about the U.S. Army, but just in this particular case. And he's burning all his shit. He's burning this jet and all his toy jet and all this stuff, and then... It like freezes on Jody's face at the end, and then the obnoxious sound effect of glass breaking with Jody's image in some of the worst 3D graphics of a window cracking with his image shattered. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? As if he was an army guy, and if Sam possessed him, then he would probably buy more military shit, wouldn't he? I don't know. Either way, it's an okay film. It's not. I didn't feel like I wasted time. It was funny. It's a goofy sort of straight-to-video slasher, and it didn't offend me like most of these shitty straight-to-DVD movies because it didn't insult the intelligence. Like there was at least some sort of messaging going on into the film that you can talk about it, you know, and you can open up a conversation with people. And the murders are not too bad. Like this guy getting his head chopped off. I thought they weren't going to show it, but his actual head is like a decapitated head is shown in the movie. And I thought it was fine. You know, it was an okay film. So I would give this movie a decent 5 out of 10. Getting on stilts in the middle of the night just to look at nicely formed buttocks, and then trying to run away as slowly as possible on those stilts. And with that, this has been the Horror Deconstruction.
The Horror Deconstruction.